kick off.
Sure. Brad Reed,
I'm here.
Andy Kishitz,
Here.
Gerard Ahern,
Here.
Elizabeth Hutchins,
Here.
and Gabriella Mano.
Here.
Thank you.
Thanks, folks. So this is the continuation from the May 9th hearing, and similar format to follow. We had just a quick overview of some of the documents we've received since our last hearing. We have a May 24th letter from the Bolton Board of Health. They had some comments. 5/31, the applicant submitted a host of documents, including revised plans, site distance calcs, architectural elevations. From description and revisions of additional information from Dillis and Roy, unit types B and D elevation, and a description of all the changes. And then 6/1, we have a Horsley Witten group peer review letter highlighting items that have been received and where they may have no further comment, but also noting that the wetlands response is still outstanding. 6/3, communications from an abutter, Randall Hegland. From Randall Hegland, who's the DPW director, had a question on the pipe size of the PVC, and 6/5, communication from an abutter, William Stevens and Catherine Riggert. So, and then Joe Pesnell had an updated letter today. So, got a bunch of documents to look at. We'll start with the applicant giving their update, and then we'll move to some of the other, Horsley Witten, and then Hancock, and hopefully we can look at the most recent waiver list tonight as well, and get an idea of if there's any open ones that we have no support for.
Okay, Seth, you want to start it?
Yeah, so Mr. Chairman, this is Seth Donahoe with Dillis and Roy. We had spoken last meeting. You had given us a little bit of homework. You specifically wanted us to approach some of the other boards that we had some waivers that were related to. And as you mentioned, we approached both the planning board and the Board of Health, sending them a written request for comments. My office attended the May 25th planning board meeting, and Jim was able to attend the recent Board of Health meeting. As you mentioned, the Board of Health sent over some comments, which we received and had no objections to. In response to those, and as well as some of the Horsley and Witten comments that were outstanding, we did prepare a revised plan. As you noted, that included some additional details regarding site distances, and we provided a letter that clarified some of those items. We are asked to complete a drainage analysis of the area behind Unit 3. And we did do so, and also revised the grading slightly to accommodate that area. And then the other thing that was not requested, but we decided to adjust infiltration area A, which is the smaller infiltration area right along South Bolton Road. We twisted that so that it would no longer be in the abutter's 100-foot well radius. So we were able to move that with no major changes to the design and accommodate the abutter as well. That is a very brief summary of the changes we made. And if Jim wants to dive in any of the extra work that he has undertaken since our last meeting, I can step aside for a moment.
I will talk about the architecturals. We were working with the architecturals, and we went to the design review board. Joe has commented in his letter also. They were very satisfied. They did want to see some colors, which are now done. They just got done at about 4 o'clock this evening. So I could show them, share my screen and show them to this board. They did want me to go back with the colors to them. They thought the timing, they would be able to accommodate the ZBA's timing requirements. So if this board wants to see the actual colors on the facades, we can show that tonight too. So
Yeah, sure. Might as well strike while it's hot.
So I think that's would be our updates from our side. I don't know how the board wants to do it tonight. If they want to go into Joe's letter, I did read through Joe's letter, and there was a lot of information in Joe's letter. So
right. So for board accommodation, do people want to see the plans that were adjusted in the architectural drawings now? Or do we want to wait till we get comments from the other professionals and then see them at that point? Any preference?
Now, why don't we move on and look at those after we get input?
Okay. So does Janet, do you want to speak to whatever new information you received and incorporate it into your 6th peer review letter?
Sure. For the record, my name is Janet Bernardo. I'm a professional civil engineer with the Horsley Witten Group. We have conducted a number of peer reviews on this project. Our last letter was dated June 1st. We received some information just last week from the applicant. And so knowing that you had this hearing tonight, we tried to accommodate the schedule. So the applicant, from the stormwater point of view, I believe the applicant has addressed all of our concerns. There was, as Seth noted, they changed some grading to accommodate some of the runoff coming from the abutting property that's kind of like a hillside coming down. And so we kind of regraded an area to have a depression. So the homeowner association may want to not change that depression, though if they were to change it and fill it in, the runoff would just go into their stormwater system. So it wouldn't impact too many other people. It maybe would increase a little bit of runoff leaving the site again, because maybe that stormwater system would get over full, but it's not a significant amount of runoff because it's all woods. If that all of a sudden became a big development, some type of a housing development, then, I mean, it's a pretty steep slope, so I doubt it will become anything, but things happen. So then, you know, I assume that the town would require whoever was developing to manage their own stormwater so that it would not be then entering this property. And that's kind of how it works. So anyway, they may want to, the homeowners association the zoning board may want to ask the homeowners association to make sure that area doesn't change the grades. It's fine. We also just provided a few different conditions that we've talked about before, recommendations that the zoning board may want to incorporate as far as conditions go. The Board of Health did include a letter. There wasn't a lot of substance in their letter, but it's the Board of Health's kind of jurisdiction. So we will defer to their approval on the wells and that information. And then the site distance, their applicant has made some suggestions for mitigation for not having as much of a site distance as would be required if this was a 40-mile-per-hour roadway. So we are just deferring, you know, that mitigation gets approved by the Bolton Police Department.
Okay.
So that was pretty much where we're at. We feel like, and then there's still the wetlands pieces that are outstanding. The applicant will need to go to the Conservation Commission. And at some point, all that information will need to get answered.
Did you look at the comment? I think there was one about marking maybe surveying the well lines associated with the abutters to be sure that I don't have the letter in front of me, but it seemed like they had an issue about the well locations or the septic locations associated with the abutters properties.
Oh, the Board of Health did?
Was it Board of Health or was that the planning board?
Well, the memo, I saw one memo from the Board of Health that had very few words on it.
Okay.
So I don't remember that being one of them. But understanding, I mean, as far as the irrigation wells that they're proposing, and while the drinking water wells, they definitely want to know exactly how far away the septic systems are, but they're probably more than 100 feet away from their own property line, so
I think that comment had come from a discussion I had with the Board of Health.
Okay,
Just the suggestion that it may be easier for the board members to consider those waivers. If that, I forget what sheet it was on the plans, but if the utility sheet showed the property lines of all abutters and the proximity to existing wells and septics.
okay. Yeah.
Can I speak on that a bit?
Sure.
When you go for well approval, which comes off the septic design, typically, the septic design will set the well locations. So Bill will be reviewing that as part of the well approval to make sure that we don't encroach on somebody's land or somebody's septic system and a butter's property. If you do a bird's eye view of the property, there's not too many people that are close proximity to where the wells are going. But I mean, the Board of Health and Bill Brookings has the ultimate say on where we site the wells. And they will have to meet his approval. Even if we agree to where they go today, if I submit it to Bill and something doesn't meet their requirements, they're gonna have me move the wells.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Yep.
so we have nothing further.
Okay, perfect. But for the fact that, so that was on the stormwater, but again, on the wetlands, you still have no response. So Jim, you want to
Yeah.
speak to that?
Yeah,
It's
I'll
still
speak to that.
outstanding?
We're working on a letter, but what we're trying to do too is to get something from the zoning board where we can actually make because we have to file, everybody knows we have to file with the conservation. So in one of the things we do know too, it being a comprehensive permit, the local wetlands don't apply, but I know this board wants to see what kind of variances we would guess go or exceptions we would make under the local bylaw, but what we're taking is the stance, like Greg Roy mentioned in the past, that we want to go to them after we get some type of approval on our site now, so we can explain to conservation where the buildings are going to be, where the road's going to be, what's the pitch of the road, what's the detention basins look like, and all that. If we go there now, then we don't have the right information to make a formal NOI submittal. So that's kind of where we're at with it.
So when we look at the waiver list, we'll see what waivers you've requested, if any, are associated with the wetlands, and then we'll have to decide whether, if we have no information to prove or deny them on, we'll have to see what the best course of action of those is, because we just can't. I wouldn't think we just could make a decision to approve them if we have outstanding questions on that. But we'll look at that when we get to the waivers. And we'll seek Joe's guidance on that as well.
Yep.
Okay. Joe, do you want to chime in on your letter, given that it sort of touches some of the topics we've already discussed? You're on mute, I think. There you go.
Good evening, members of the board. Yes, happy to jump in. So, yeah, I think there's been great progress. We're really down to a few issues. I think it would be critical to get police input on their proposed mitigation. It's difficult for you as a board not dealing with such matters on a regular basis to understand the implications of insufficient sight distance, other than just your experience as a driver and pulling out when you don't feel safe. So I think their mitigation offer is appropriate. I think it needs to be reach out to police chief and get his take on it. If you don't get back input, I would memorialize the offer in a specific condition
Mhm.
that tied it to the project and probably occupancy permit, so that you know that the system's in place prior to anybody actually living there.
Mhm.
The other issue is the wetlands, and it really is. I would suggest to the applicant that they really kind of understand the need for this information with regards to the board's deliberation on the waivers. And essentially what I recommend boards get when put in the shoes of the Conservation Commission on a waiver request from a wetland bylaw that is, I guess, the type of bylaw that changes the nature of the resource areas. So not only does this bylaw take jurisdiction over isolated wetlands, but it changes the buffer zone into a quasi resource area. And there are reasons that the Conservation Commission has for doing that. And then there is a set process that the Conservation Commission goes through to determine whether or not any work within those zones is appropriate and can be approved. The only difference between the analysis, review, deliberation that the Conservation Commission has and that your board is being asked to do is the criteria for grant of a waiver from the Conservation Commission. The bar is much higher. They have the far-reaching discretionary power to administer their local bylaw and protection of the wetland and the resource areas in accordance with their local bylaw is the utmost in their minds. And they essentially could just say no, and it would be defensible. In your case, the bar is moved, and we go back to the presumption that the need for affordable housing outweighs local concerns, which sets the bar fairly low. But that doesn't excuse the board from at least having the information afforded to them to review and understand, so that you can properly determine whether mitigation is required and whether specific conditions need to be put in place to replace those values that the Conservation Commission puts on these special resource areas. So I think that's what Amy was getting at. And Amy's questions that went unanswered went to exactly that kind of review and analysis. So without the responses from their professional, Amy's kind of handcuffed into giving you input with regards to that potential mitigation or that potential condition or whatever it be. And then, and then the board can decide. Now that's what I believe needs to be done in the spirit of this board's role as the sole comprehensive permit granting authority. Many boards don't, and they understand the bar, and they say it really doesn't matter what we analyze and what we review. At the end of the day, we've got to say yes. But I think you lose an opportunity to respect the local concerns, which in this case is the local wetland bylaw, and what is normal in the town of Bolton on non-affordable housing projects with regards to that review.
Right. Because I think it's important in that we've heard along the process that, yes, they're working on it. Although I had a little shift tonight that they're waiting to maybe get that information after we've made a decision to go to the Conservation Committee. So it's like, I'm not sure if we're fully working on it or not, but I would like to, I think it's important that we've hired the peer review team from Horsey to opine or give us guidance on stormwater and wetlands. And, clearly the applicant from Janet's perspective has met, the stormwater conditions, but, it's odd that we're getting no feedback, not even a letter response on the wetlands. So,
Can I speak on that?
sure.
We've had a lot of discussion on the wetlands, and we've submitted documents to this board in the 2 years or so we've been working together. So it's not like we haven't answered it. What I was referring to was the Greg Roy conversation. You can look it up in the minutes that Valerie has probably written. Greg asked this board to do it that way. That's what I was referring to. Does anybody remember that conversation here tonight? That Greg Roy mentioned this at a meeting, saying we were going to wait?
No,
We've
there
been
was
asking-
the discussion with waiting on filing a notice of intent.
Mhm.
And there was discussion early about the ANRAD and filing the ANRAD, and that was done. But with regard to response to Amy Ball's 4 points out of 6 that went unanswered, unanswered,
Mhm.
I think it's been my understanding all along that was forthcoming.
Yeah, and it's still forthcoming. And I granted an extension to July 5th, and I've done everything this
Yeah, no, but
board has asked me to do. It will happen. It just, my person I chose to hire is having some difficulties with their office.
Okay.
Like I said before, like when some of the other people were running late on deliverables, I can't go and hold a gun to their head. Am I telling this board right now tonight that I'm not going to get them that information? No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that, it's been a hard process. I've reached out to experts. I've hired them. I've paid them. I've done the best I can do. I cannot, somebody, as of Friday, she sent me a draft letter. It's not ready yet.
okay.
What am I supposed to do?
So that's a better response than what we had earlier. Is that okay?
No,
so
but
you're
what I
still
was-
working you're still working with your professional. You've got a draft letter, and that acknowledging that we have a hearing date presently as of 7/5 to 7/5 to close that, and maybe prior to the next hearing, we'll have those 4 items responded to, such that when we review all the waivers, we will have confidence that at least you'll have provided something, and that our peer review can look at it and say, yeah, that's reasonable. And if there's some other information that'll come out in the post-permitting process, then that's fine. If there's a condition, that, prior to occupant or whatever, that all these things are buttoned up. But yes, we will at least have some information. I don't want to have a glaring hole where we've in our documentation where we've, been back and forth on expectations, and something just because of waiting out the clock doesn't happen,
Correct. So this board will get the information that it seeks, then those 4 answers will do that. My goal was to put Maureen from Norris in touch with Amy Ball to see specifically what she wanted.
Mhm.
I try to task my expert to do that.
Mhm.
And for some reason, it didn't happen yet. I don't know why.
Okay. Well, just keep your gentle nudge.
Yep, I will.
Okay. So other than those 2 primary areas, Joe,
Yeah, I think that's it.
Mhm.
What I had for tonight was Board of Health, Planning Board, and DRB, which is done. Site distance,
Mhm.
wetlands response. Looks like they're gonna pass the color renderings by DRB and the board easily get some feedback there. Hopefully it's just, hey, that's great. Then the board can just take those latest plans and colored elevations and make them part of the record, and that's it.
Yeah.
So the only thing I see outside of that is, to start to talk about the framework of a decision, any specialized conditions, which I don't think there are any secret conditions that the board's going to come up with,
Right.
Outside of possibly something to do with the wetlands issue. But even there, I don't think anything's going to come of that that's going to be, caused in pain with regards to cost and so forth.
Yeah.
So I think Valerie and I could start working on a draft decision. I think we have to, seeing that the time is short. And then the board should find a time, if not tonight, to review the waiver list. But if you have time and energy tonight, it's probably appropriate to
Yeah, no, I was
at least begin discussion there.
Right, we get that waiver list up, the most recent one, and then we can walk through and, certain ones, like the affordable housing related ones, or, more than one home on a lot, we can walk through and see which ones that are just should be easy to approve. And then any others, if we have their, we can always say we have the documentation to make the approval. If that's what's motioned, and then, what's open, and then say by the time we have our next hearing, we should, if we have a draft framework where it also has the all the final waivers in there, we could then do a final vote probably at that time on the waivers, leaving open the rest of the decision so we can, fill in the holes, and then make our, if we close the hearing, then we can make our decision during that 40-day period, clean up the decision, and then make the, have the actual meeting to vote on the decision.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I may, we had actually submitted a formal waiver request letter back in March, and that is unchanged except for the omission of one. Prior to last meeting, we relocated a sewer force main, the only one in the development, so that waiver was no longer required. But all the rest stand, they're unchanged from that submittal. So I'd be happy to go line by line on that if the board has the energy tonight, or I can let you review that letter, and then we can talk in more detail at a later date.
Well, I mean, I'd like to put that letter in front today if we could, that way, if we have any questions from the board, we can memorialize a little bit overnight, and then for the next hearing, as I said, we were just talking about having a draft framework of a decision, have those, all the ones that are required in there, and then we could, if everyone has a full understanding of, yep, we're aware of those, we believe we have the documentation to support them. What if there's any open, then we know which ones we have to really focus on for the next hearing, and then we can have a probably easy approval or review and approval process on those and make appropriate motions. In the past, we usually we've done it a couple different ways, but two primary, we either make motions for each section of waivers, or we've had I think one or two cases where we've actually done individual motion on every waiver. So we'll look at them and see what's best if the board has a preference, and then that will set us up for the next hearing to say, okay, this is how we're gonna review and approve them at that time.
So with that, I'd be happy to either share my screen or forward that letter to Valerie so that you guys can control the scrolling of it.
Do you have a preference, Valerie?
Yeah, I think it's fine if Seth wants to walk through it. You should be able to share your screen now.
Okay, so we'll go through that, and then we'll, after that, we'll, I mean, we did have a couple of communications from the DPW and from an abutter, William Stevens and Captain Riggert, about some boundary markers and things like that. So we can talk about those toward the end and make sure we don't leave any documentation omitted for tonight.
All right, so with any luck, the letter should be on your screens right now.
Yep, looks
Great.
good.
So the first thing is the groundwater protection regulations. This is something that the board has waived on all prior comprehensive permits that I'm aware of. It is just a something within the town's bylaws that would be redundant to this process. The second one, and that's probably what we'll spend the most time talking about, that is the Bolton Wetlands bylaw waivers. And those call out the specific distances that the project requires to be constructed, as well as the nature of them. And I can go line by line on those, or you can certainly digest those at a later time.
So on that first one, groundwater protection, so is the ultimate waiver, the specific waiver request from 147 1B3 to allow for construction of the development, which includes AC?
My understanding is that that is a special permit, and that would be redundant to this process. The comprehensive permit essentially grants the special permits, and this is basically out of a overabundance of caution to make sure that all the bases are covered, and that when somebody eventually goes to construct this, there's, whether the building inspector changes, they don't say that there's something missing in this package.
Okay.
The Bolton Wetlands bylaws, we have them spelled out unit by unit and nature of alteration too. So we have grading occurring 30 feet from a wetland resource area, distance of pavement, and then we have a couple of the units within the development, which are within the locally protected 100-foot buffer zone to a wetland resource area.
Mhm.
Can I ask a question?
Sure, Janet.
Would it be helpful to the board to understand what is allowed? So when they say located 57 feet from a wetland resource area, what's allowed by the Conservation Commission or by the wetland permit? Is it 100 feet? Is it 58 feet? Is it?
So I can
Would
provide
that
some
be
information
useful?
on that.
I'm not sure if that would be helpful, but I was trying to figure it out.
Yeah, no, I think,
Oh, go ahead. I'm so sorry.
no, that's a good comment. Thanks, Janet.
So as Mr. Pesnola mentioned, Bolton essentially treats the 100-foot buffer zone, which surrounds the wetland resource areas, essentially as resource areas in themselves. And while in some cases there's a clear definition of what needs to be done, it's also something that can be open to interpretation and open to the commission's allowance. So particular example would be if somebody is looking to develop their property and there's no way to do it without going into the 100-foot buffer zone, it would be at the Conservation Commission's jurisdiction to allow that if they felt it was appropriate, or if there was certain mitigation provided. Now, in the case of the State Act, which we would intend to apply under when we eventually reach the Conservation Commission, the state allows up to 5,000 square feet of wetlands to actually be altered, and essentially requires us to file when we alter anything within 100 feet of certain wetland resource areas. And it does not have as high of a bar as the local Bolton wetland regulations do. And that's why we've requested these waivers, as they are indeed necessary to construct the infrastructure and buildings that we've depicted on this plan. So I know that's not the clearest answer. I hope that provides some light on why we're asking for it, though. And so I'll move on to the next one, which is schedule of permitted uses. And I believe, as the board's aware, in the residential zone, generally there's only one building or one principal use, a dwelling per lot. And in this case, we have 8 separate dwellings that we are proposing on this site. So that waiver would be required for that reason. The driveways and parking. So we are proposing, as this is not a subdivision road that we're creating, we're essentially creating a shared driveway that mirrors many of the requirements of a regular subdivision road. For instance, a regular shared or common driveway in Bolton requires a reduced turning area at the end and reduced width, lower than what we're proposing. So we're essentially asking for information, or requesting to allow a shared driveway to be constructed closer to a road standard, a normal pavement with a normal cul-de-sac style turnaround at the end of it.
Mhm.
And then the town of Bolton well regulations, we've spoken at length about these. These are setbacks to lot lines that are in line with what the state requires. These are the specific wells that require relief to be granted. And I'll point out too that even though the Bolton Board of Health has much more stringent guidelines for the construction of sewage disposal systems, this development does not require any waivers to be granted for that. So our septic system is in compliant with both the local regulations and the state regulations as we're required to do. And in a nutshell, that is the waivers that we have requested. So if
What
there's
was
any,
what was the one that you said was in it but wouldn't be required?
so we had requested this one right here, the unit 1.
Mhm.
We had requested the well to be located 24 feet from a sewer force main. We've since revised that. I believe at the last meeting, we relocated the infrastructure on that lot so that that specific waiver is no longer required.
Right, so the unit 1, 24 feet, no longer required, okay. No, that's perfect like that, yeah.
And so if there's any specifics related to those
Mhm.
requests, as I've had the opportunity to work on a couple 40Bs before this board, I think you'll find that this list is actually less than many of the other ones that have been before you.
Oh, no, it's yeah, it's condensed in relative perspective, as you say. So any of the board members, any questions or comments or regarding what just was reviewed, so that as you say, as these get incorporated into the draft decision, we'll be able to vote on them.
Seth, can you just scroll back up to near the top? Because I just missed some of the stuff at the top.
Is that Andy?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have a question about the second bullet point that talks about the buffer zones for the wetlands.
Okay, well,
So,
let's have Andy go first, and then we'll have is that Liz?
oh, sorry, Andy.
The only thing I didn't catch was where is the pavement area that's 56 feet from a wetland resource area? Where is that on the site?
That is, and I can pull up the plan, roughly around station 300 to 325 on the road. So that would be past unit 1. And then I'd call it the bulk of the development is units 2 through 8, which are essentially around the cul-de-sac. It's between those two areas. And what we have is a proposed guardrail in that area. So there'd be no intrusion closer than that.
Okay, thanks.
So my question is about the just all of those general sort of wetland resource areas. So you said these are obviously waivers from the Bolton bylaws, but you said these are in compliance with the state regulations. Is that what I'm understanding? So what is the state regulation then from distance to wetland resource area? Did I miss that?
They do not have a defined setback. So they would allow you to actually alter up to 5,000 square feet of a wetland resource area, a bordering vegetated wetland, if you were able to mitigate that on site. So you could essentially fill in a portion of the wetlands and then provide another section of wetlands. Generally, it's done at a ratio, say 1 to 1.5 or double what you're altering. But that would be the state standard. So we would be exceeding that.
Okay.
Perfect.
Were there any other questions related to the waiver list?
Not from my perspective, but I'll let any other board members chime in.
And then you have well related waivers as well, right? So just to kind of confirm what I think you had said earlier was that this is estimated, right? But once this goes to the Board of Health, if they decide that the wells need to be in different locations, this could change. Is that what I'm understanding?
So this would be what we'd consider a worst case scenario. So if for some reason there was an issue with an abutter's well line, say, it would have to be encroaching on our property. So they would have to install that on property of others. And we needed to respect that. We could adjust that within the framework of the waivers that we've requested with some limitations.
Yeah.
And I believe most of the board's decisions, they provide a clause that if there's a change within the plans, if they deem that it's not substantial, it could essentially be granted. If it is a substantial change, then we would have to re-enter this process.
Yep.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Val, you have any questions? You good?
I don't have any right now, no.
Okay, perfect. So,
I'm going to stop the sharing of the screen unless the board needs anything else.
okay, I'm good at that. All right, so that's good. I think we're lined up well for the next hearing on concluding on those as they get embedded into the decision, draft decision. We could do a section by section of approval, motion for approval on those, and get that piece of the application process done.
I have one quick question, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
The
Right.
fact that we don't have the wetlands review nailed down yet, how much is that going to affect, if any, the process of waivers? I'm not clear at this point on we need the information to have it in our files, but I'm not sure how it impacts the waivers. Seems to me the state doesn't really provide much protection of wetlands. So.
And from what I heard, that Jim Moore and the applicant's goal is to have his peer reviewer try to get that information to us, get something by our next hearing, so that the bulk of these, on a portion of those, we already probably have the information or the past practice of granting those waivers on certain portions, but on the wetland specifics, we hope to have more information so that we do have some guidance on what we're making a decision on.
Yeah, it seems to be a whole lot of information I'm not comfortable with at this point, but we'll have to wait, see what comes in.
Yeah. That's fine. So I think hopefully that will resolve itself, in advance of that next hearing, when we schedule. We do have the 7/5 continuation date, close date presently. That's the extended 2 date at current. So, unless nothing comes in at that point, we'll just deal with that at the next hearing. And if that were to cause another extension for some reason or request, we'll have to deal with that. But
I'll speak on that if I could. If my expert doesn't, I will hire Phyllis and Roy to fill in the holes. They do have a similar expert within their staff. So and maybe that's my bad decision from the beginning. I wanted to include somebody who I worked with for a very long time. But they're experiencing some problems. I don't want to speak for Seth and Dillis and Roy, but I think the offer had come out a long time ago is if I need that help, that I would get it.
Right. So I think you get a sense of, the importance of getting some information for us, for our peer reviewer, and, so we can feel comfortable on concluding on those waivers, particularly on the wetlands issue. So let's see what we can do and get that buttoned up. All right, so there was, I don't know if you got that, Jim or Seth, there was a 6-3 communication from Randall Hagelin, the director of Bolton's DPW. And I don't know if Valerie has the letter she can bring up, but I just have my notes that he had a question on verifying whether the 6-inch PVC pipe SDR 35 was the right size or whether it should be 8-inch. 6-inch versus 8-inch. He was thinking maybe it should be larger versus what's there. But I don't have the context. Do you have that letter, Valerie?
I think that was just about all he had in that email.
Yeah, but there's probably better description versus what I was saying. I just took
Sure.
some key points of it.
Yes, let me just pull it up.
Mhm.
Sorry, this laptop's quite slow. All right, can you see that?
Yes, there we go.
Yep.
So, right, so it's talking about the access roadway to the community septic system. And he wanted to just confirm whether that 8-inch should be the likely minimum based on the number of houses. Do you have any input on that, either Jim or Seth?
I will take a stab if that's all right, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
So what he's referencing to is the each building sewer flows to a sewer line essentially that's within the roadway. It's indeed a 6-inch that's been specified that goes down to the leaching area associated with the project. The ultimate call on that would be with the Board of Health. As the board knows, we will be submitting a formal septic system design plan at that time. If they felt it needed to be upsized, or if our office felt like it needed to be upsized, it certainly would. It wouldn't change any of the design standards that are on here or any of the waivers that are related. So I think I'm not able to address it at this time, but I can also assure you that it would have no impact on the infrastructure that's laid out.
Okay. But that would be, say, if that were the wrong sizing, it would be picked up in the subsequent review by Board of Health on the final project type of thing when you're into construction.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. And then how about Valerie, can you bring up the letter or the communication from the Stevens Riggert abutter? Maybe some of these things Jim's already or the applicant's already taken care of, but it seems like they've at least been put on notice on some of these items. And I'd like to make sure that there are not any issues as we're bringing this to a conclusion.
Yeah, Gerard, I think it's also important at some point for us to see the site plan to understand the affected area and the proximity to this abutter.
Okay.
I'd be happy to share my screen whenever the board is ready.
Sure.
Yeah, would you like to look at the site plan now, or would you like to review the letter itself?
I'd like to go over the letter first, but
Sure. So let's look at the letter. Okay. So Jim, have you seen this letter before or had discussions with this abutter?
I recently got the letter from Valerie. I worked with this abutter, it was a couple of years ago. And I've personally talked to their attorney. And one of the things, when I think they brought the property in about 2009 or later, This was an existing traveled way from when the previous owner owned this land, and it was open for, if you go back on the aerials, I went back, I think, to 2001, and this disturbance was there way before I bought the property.
Mhm.
And once I explained it to their attorney, I never heard back from their attorney. So you can go on the aerials and see that. So that, as far as the several trespasses, I think that would address that issue. We did, once we knew where the line was, we put a string from control point to control point, and we did put boulders there. So that's why we know the boulders kind of demarcation to protect their land. So those were set by me and my operator. So I would say I'm 100% positive there's no boulders on their land. And then they're getting into some grading on the backside that Seth could probably show us. They're worried about some kind of, there's been some earth removal on the Mallard Lane side, Small Ridge, and worried about several mature tree risk, something like that. I don't know, but the majority of it, we dealt, my wife and I dealt with their attorney, I think it was a couple of years ago. And I thought we substantially proved that, that disturbance was way before they bought the property and way before I bought the property. And it was done by Bonazzoli. Bonazzoli was using that as a construction storage yard. And he was the original owner. That family owned all that land. The parcel I ended up buying at the end was the last remaining piece. So Bonazzoli had stuff all through there. He traveled through the woods and did all kinds of things way back in time, I guess. So that's what I have to say on the letter. And if Seth wants to call up the plan, I can talk about the areas where I think that they're talking about in their letter.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that'd be good. And I think the abutters from Valerie indicated the abutter is available to speak to his the concerns. So,
Yes, I don't know if the abutter does want to speak, or if they feel like the letter is adequate.
right, so.
Hello,
Hello?
this is William Stevens. I'm the abutter who wrote the letter.
Okay,
Is it?
sure.
So thanks for this, hearing our concerns. Our lawyer did send a letter, and there was a string put out. Some of the boulders were on our side of the string at that time. At any rate, our biggest concern is really the little ridge that straddles our property and the Mallard Lane property. And there's a bunch of mature trees on it. They've already been cutting back into that ridge. And on the site plan, it says retaining wall, and it seems to show the retaining wall right up to the border, which would definitely be cutting into the root systems of the trees. And we're pretty concerned about the trees being damaged or, being compromised, possibly, if that's happening. And part of the concern would be they damage the root systems, the trees would be at risk of falling, they'd have to come down, but the trees wouldn't necessarily, if they weren't damaged, they're big mature trees that act as a screen between this property and our property. Like to know if that could be dealt with in a way that would not harm these trees. They're large trees.
Okay.
Can we
Well,
see on a map where this
Mhm.
is?
Right.
Because it's unclear to me. I think I have an idea, but.
Yeah, I think they were gonna bring up the site plan next, Liz.
Well, it seems to be what I'm talking about is like behind, I think I have to zoom in to tell what houses it is. Let's see. It looks like behind house 5 and house 6 is this little ridge, and there's a sign saying retaining wall, and it seems my guessing is that hash lines are the retaining wall, and it shows it going right up pretty much the property line. And that property line there has many big trees along it there.
Mhm.
And I'm looking at, what is it called? Construction layout notes. Oh, heck, I just lost what I was looking at, but it's house 5 or house 6, I guess, right behind there.
Mr. Chairman, if I could take a moment to address that.
Sure.
So hopefully you can see my screen. I've circled the area that's in question. There is indeed some grading slightly offset from the lot line. It's entirely on Mr. Morin's property. We will not be altering property of others to construct this. There is a small gravelly ridge in that area. And Jim can correct me if I'm wrong, but from walking out there, I believe after the ridge, there's the remnants of a old haul road or cart path in that vicinity. Is that correct, Jim?
Yeah, it goes up a little bit further. There's a walking trail, I guess, that is on top of the ridge, and it starts kind of behind unit 5. So yeah. So on the slope from say 370 to 373, that's contained on our property, I think some of the mature growth are more onto his property. There's a large pine that's property corner. We're not going to be around that. After that, I think Bonazzoli, there's a lot of scrub trees. What I say scrub, like 6-inch minus in that area. But like Seth was talking about, we can't grade on other properties. And I don't believe there's a wall there, like the gentleman just mentioned either. He said that we were going to build a wall there. I don't see a wall on that plan.
It does say on one of the sheets that there's a proposed retaining wall. I actually just saw it. It's on sheet. What is this? Sorry, the layout plan.
There's actually, you can see there's call outs for the top of the wall right here, 377 bottom, 373. So there's a minor retaining wall in that area. And that's exactly as designed, is to prevent any damage to the grade on the abutting property. Jim, if you're up for it, we could certainly locate those trees and plot them on this plan though, and estimate the root zone on them as well. If there was a need that wall needed to be adjusted slightly to accommodate the root zone of that tree, we could certainly do so.
Yeah, I'm definitely up for that. And I apologize. I didn't know there was a wall there. One of the things we talked about walls in this whole division or subdivision is we're going to use walls. They're called the ready block wall that doesn't need back support and then go 8 feet high without any back support. So that, like Seth was talking about, those are ideal to prevent any kind of damage to anything that's in proximity of the property line. But I would agree with Seth is that we can go out and locate any of the trees that need to be located along those concerns behind units 5 and 6.
Question, Mr. Chairman. Is it possible to move the wall to a different location to minimize the impact and not affect your plan?
So as the existing grade is at a set elevation there, we're essentially, the site is a formal gravel pit. And we are using that area to put the houses down in the low spot. And so there is some grading behind the units. To answer the board member's question, we can certainly adjust the wall to accommodate the offsite root structure of a tree if need, but there would need to be some form of wall there just so that we can go from the existing grade to what the proposed finished grade is.
No, I guess my question was more how flexible is the position of the wall rather than, in fact, I assume you do need a wall if you've got a grading problem. But anyway, just a question.
Yeah, I read this letter and I thought this was actually a really valid point because I know that there's quite a few trees, even where the other retaining walls are along on kind of like between units 2 and 3. I believe there's quite a few mature trees there because I remember in the walkthrough, it was pretty wooded, but
Mhm.
I guess my concern is exactly that. Like, you damage part of roots of some of these really large trees and you're in a bad situation. I mean, I'm personally living through this right now, actually. So we've had some pretty large trees come down due to construction damage, where the trees were saved and they're marked and they're wrapped, but the roots were just cut right through, and so the tree half died. And now a couple of years later, it's become an issue. So it would be my suggestion that, you know, that's considered, and that you guys really just make sure you're taking a hard look at exactly where the damage, or not the damage, but where the excavation will occur, and make sure that the least damage occurs to those trees. And if damage does occur and you know it, then take the tree down just so that it doesn't become a liability later. Because it's a legit concern.
Okay, so but for this issue on the trees in that wall and the encroachment on that ridge, am I hearing from the abutter that the boulders and whatever marker are being pounded, I mean, those items are sort of cleared up, or they still need to be?
This is again.
Hello?
Oh, excuse me, this is William Stevens. Well, I think other things should be addressed, and I don't think Mr. Moran dismissal of the letter is totally correct. The boundary marker is pounded down into the ground, and it's that is recent. When it was first put up there, it stood up about 8 inches or so above the ground and was easily found. And now it's pounded down in, and it looks like there was some stones around it, and it looks like maybe it's been moved. We've contacted our stair to, actually resolve whether it has been moved or not, and also the position of those rocks, because I don't think it's true that the rocks are all on Mallard Lane property. So I think that still needs to be resolved. Just because Mr. Moran says what he says doesn't mean that it's true.
Okay. So I'll have to leave that up to Jim and you as far as to figure out that aspect is, if Jim's saying that he drew the line and the rocks are always on the right side and on his property versus yours. I guess, it'd be nice to have some resolution before we wrap it up, that is in fact the case. So people are confident that this isn't going to be an issue.
Yeah, I think he was talking about a while ago before I put the string line up. What I did was I run the string line between the 2 property corners when I set the boulders to make sure, to the best of our abilities on site without an instrument, that the boulders were on our property, and they haven't moved. And the GC Wilson did set an iron pin, which is a rebar with a plastic cap on it. We did set some little rocks around it to protect it, and it wasn't moved. So, GC Wilson, according to the abutter, is going to come back out to verify that, but
Okay.
I can assume I don't move property lines.
Right. And that it's still, it hasn't sunken, it's still.
I don't know. I know the cap's still on it. I know it says GC Wilson. I know it's on orange cap. I know it's a piece of rebar.
It's visible?
Yeah, it's visible. Yeah, it's well, we nested it. We put, like I said, rocks all around it so it would protect it and stuff like that.
Okay.
We do use it as a point of reference when we're out on site, doing our planning purposes. I know it wasn't moved.
Well, this is William Stevens again. I'd like to comment on that. That piece of rebar with the cap was pounded down a couple inches below the ground level, and I uncovered it the other day. And when that string was first put up, I walked into the woods, and you could see that the the boulders were on our side of the string at that point. The string has fallen down since then. But I don't think that what he's saying is true. And as of Sunday, it was when I just went out and looked, and as of months ago, the boundary marker was pounded below the ground level, and I uncovered it again the other day on Sunday, I believe it was. But anyhow, we'll have the surveyor look at it and hopefully resolve it.
Sure.
If I could point out, Mr. Chairman, the property lines of the parcel, they're mathematically established to points that are far removed from the actual site. So if a monument was indeed manipulated, we could certainly address that and replace it prior to construction or prior to permitting, but it would have no impact on the plan as drawn. These lines were established long before any of these issues came to light, and they'll remain after the fact as they are indeed the legal boundaries of the parcel.
Noted. Okay. So I'm sure the butter is going to have someone look at that, and if there's still a big any concern, I just asked you to document it back to the board so that we can be sure it gets to the applicant during our time on this project, and we'll hopefully see resolution.
And are the boulders in question, are those temporary or did you put them there for a permanent?
They're temporary. We're going to provide some screening so it looks across the wetland feature from that particular unit. They're just temporary to make sure, because I do have employees. I didn't want anybody going there. So that's why I put the boulders. I know where I'm going, but sometimes my employees, they might venture somewhere. So they're temporary, and we're going to provide screening behind that unit that's closer to the wetland feature, as discussed in all the plans that have been before this board.
Okay.
Thanks, Jim.
Good question, Andy. Thanks, Jim. All right, so I think we've covered all the new materials. We reviewed the waivers. We got a plan for what we need for in advance of the next hearing so that we can conclude on the waivers, and Joe and Valerie can start working on a draft format so that we'll have that hopefully within the same time frame as the next hearing. And we're getting close to the July 5th deadline, so that'd be great, because hopefully we can wrap up the open hearing portion of this process definitely in advance of that date. So with that, on the calendar wise, should we look toward late June to have the next hearing? Do you have a calendar, Valerie? Because we have July 4th. I don't want to pop it up necessarily if people are having a long weekend to all of a sudden, infringe on people's vacation at that point, but we'll see what the late June brings.
Yeah, so I think we are going to start running into some scheduling problems. I think I have other meetings every night the week of the 20th. And then I am out of the office the week of the 27th.
Okay. So what is that?
So then that would leave us with the week of the 4th.
Okay, well, so what is that? What date would that be? What's the?
We could do Tuesday the 5th. Actually, any night that week, Tuesday the 5th, Wednesday the 6th, or Thursday the 7th.
Okay. If we did it as late as that Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, Thursday put us past the 7/5 date, but if that's what a board is available, could we just alter that extension, Jim, for a couple days?
Yeah, my suggestion is, what does this board need to close? I mean, if it's the wetland thing, I would push it up. Just give me a week and a half, and I don't think there's that much missing. Am I wrong? I mean, if it's
No,
4 things
no,
on Amy Paul's letter,
I think, yeah, Mr. Chairman, if I might, just input from police, confirmation from design review board, and the wetlands letter with time for Amy and Janet to wrap it. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm on vacation the week of
the week of what, Joe? I didn't hear that.
week of July 4th.
Okay, so we have to find
I would
a date.
provide, this information. I can't speak for the police department, but the design review board promised me, and I got the information that they would meet right away. And then, like I said, I will call Norse tomorrow morning, and if they can't have it ready, I will pay Dillis and Roy to answer Amy's 4 questions. So I can have something way prior to the end of this month. I mean, today's the 6th. If you give me middle of the month day, if that's available, I can assure this board that I'd have everything to them.
Okay, so with
Other
that in
than the
mind,
police, because I can't, sorry to interrupt, but other than the police chief, I can't, whatever time he's going to take to comment.
Well, Mr. Chairman, the other piece of this is whether or not this board wants to follow their standard procedure to have a draft decision in front of you before you close the hearing.
right, that's
it's
where I was leaning toward.
not required, but
gives
it's what
Valerie
the
time to
practice-
work on that, as well as you, where you were offered to collaborate with her on that. So we have to sort of work with those resources. So it's not necessarily just 100% board availability; it's the availability of our available resources as well. So
Yeah, I think if Jim, if you're able to give me the information for the design review board, and just a reminder that it is not only the colors that they wanted to see, but they did want to see some of those other changes as well.
Yeah, those were all done. It was like light
Great.
sizes and some shutters and some
Great.
small stuff.
So if you're able to give me that, I could work to, the soonest I could get a design review board meeting together would be next week. And so it seems like the ZBA can't meet again until perhaps the week of July 11th, if we're meeting without or with Joe. So I think even if we are moving quickly with some of those other points, like getting police feedback, getting a meeting with the design review board, and beginning a draft of the decision, I think we're still, we are coming up on looking out the next month.
Okay, so I mean, we've been trying to do as best we can to keep moving this process along. So, but we are running into some, barriers between multiple projects hitting at the same time now, wrapping up in vacation time, Valerie's resources and whatnot. So what's that week of when you're back from vacation, Jim, is it like what's the Tuesday of that week? Joe, so are you available that Monday or Tuesday?
Yeah.
Okay, what are those dates, Monday or Tuesday? And we'll see if the board's available, Valerie, and then that's where we'll have to just put that stake and then ask Jim to allow us that extension to that date.
So that's July 11th or 12th.
So 11th is the Monday
Yes.
and 7/12 is the Tuesday. So I would need just some input from the board on they have a preference on night, and then I'll be flexible for either night.
I'm good for either date.
Yeah, I'm good for either as well.
Okay, so let's go with the Monday. That that moves it as close as we can to without delaying it another day. And 6:30 p.m.
I'm
Let's
actually,
see.
I'll be unavailable until 7. Is that
Okay.
okay?
All right, 7. That's fine.
That's the 11th.
Yeah,
Yes.
7 at 7-Eleven. That's a good lucky number.
There you go.
Yeah. Okay, so do we have a motion to continue to 7-Eleven at 7 p.m.?
I will make a motion to continue this hearing until July 11th at 7 p.m.
Right, and that should be a big night.
Second.
And those in favor, Brad Reed,
Aye.
Andy Kishitz,
Yes.
Gerard Ahern,
Yes,
Elizabeth Hutchins,
Yes.
and Gabrielle Amano.
Yes.
perfect. All right, so we'll continue 7/11 at 7 PM. And Jim, we'll just need you to send out Valerie a text or an email, or something saying that's okay. And then I say, I think that's gonna be a big night.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can I
Oh.
just make one quick thing?
Sure.
Only that I would just like, for Amy Ball's sake, that, Jim, you said you might be able to get that letter by middle of June. Please try to do that if we're gonna hit that date, because Amy, as you appreciate, your wetland scientist is very busy. So is our wetland scientist. So if she's gonna do that review, it's more time she has, the better. to get it.
Perfect.
Yeah, Jen, I had a question on that. Is it okay if Maureen or whoever I hire calls her directly to address those 4 issues, to have a conversation with her?
If the board says it's okay, it's certainly okay with Amy.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. I mean, to that point, yeah, if there's the best way to expedite it, as long as whatever Amy documents back to the board that she's felt that the explanation was sufficient, competent, evidential, then that's good.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
All right, so we'll see folks on 7/11.
Okay, thank you.
Bye. Good night.
Good night.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Janet, et al. All right, so we have on our side, we just have 2 other things. We have 2 sets of minutes to review.
Sorry, I'm not prepared. I'll pull those up.
Oh, stop it. You're always prepared.
I think it was
So we have
March.
3/16 and 4/12.
Thank you. Okay.
I did my review earlier, so I'm comfortable with them as presented. Feel free to ask Valerie to scroll when you're comfortable with what she's displayed.
Just go ahead and scroll down.
Yeah.
I looked at these and I was good with these.
Thanks, Gabrielle. Yeah, I did too. So. Is that comment with regard to this particular minute or both of them when she brings up the other set?
There was one thing on the other set that I
Okay.
wasn't sure about.
All right, perfect. Scroll a little bit while you're. Everyone good?
Yep.
Yep, okay.
I'll just find the other minutes.
Mhm. And that was 412.
Uh, 412, I couldn't have voted about me being absent, so you take me off of there.
Thanks.
Yeah, that was my comment too, was it had me vote, and I don't think I would have voted on myself to be
Mhm.
approved as a voting member, right? So I think maybe that should be Liz, because it said she seconded it and then there's no vote about her.
Okay.
So,
Good point.
Thank you.
but that was my only thing. Everything else looked fine to me. I
Yeah,
mean,
right. I think that's the night you having trouble getting in, logging in, Andy, or whatever. And so, but rather than hold the meeting up, good points.
Yes, and the meeting minutes do mention when I arrived, so that's good.
No, right, because you did arrive later into the.
Oh, there we go.
There you go. Yep. You finally arrived. You arrived. So this vote, it was accurate then. It was myself, Brad, Brian, Liz, and Gabrielle on the motion to continue the hearing.
Yes, I'll copy it above
Yep.
without Gabrielle.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And then Alta.
Valerie, should these minutes be submitted by you?
No, I do not write them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Just confirming. I know sometimes it's you.
Yes.
Sometimes it's
Yep.
not. So
We're getting a little assistance from
Yes.
because of the quantity of meetings that Valerie has to participate in. So
perfect.
Yes, Kristen works in our building department and also the Board of Health. So now she gets to listen in on your meetings too.
well, I mean, we could almost ask the town to get you a full-time assistant or something with all your work you do.
A little louder.
You should tell me the process. I'll write a letter to Dawn or to whoever and say, get you an assistant. So people comfortable with these?
Yes.
Yes.
motion to close, adjourn for the night.
Motion to accept?
Okay,
Second.
who seconded that?
And I think that's Elizabeth.
Yes, okay, thank you.
Those in favor, Brad Reed,
Yes.
Andy Kishitz,
Yes.
Gerard Ahern,
Yes,
and Elizabeth Hutchins.
Yes.
Thank you.
all right, so, and how about Gabriella?
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
so we will still meet tomorrow,
Right.
but we'll just have to continue it quite quickly. So without testimony. So it'll begin at 6, but it'll just probably take about 3 minutes. I just wanted to briefly say I'm trying to schedule that the next public hearing for 580. And it looks like it's going to be a bit difficult. So I don't know exactly when we're going to be able to meet. It might be that I think it may have to be that Liz steps in for either Gabrielle or Brian. Neither Gabrielle or Brian has missed one of them. So, it could be fine. But I also don't know if the applicant is okay with having members miss meetings at this stage because they want they want to get a vote possibly at the next meeting. So I'll keep working on it, but definitely if you can come tomorrow at 6 p.m. please do, so that we can have a quorum and vote to continue.
Do you need how many for the quorum just to continue it? Just so
I just need 3.
3. Okay, so I know I can't be available unless it's like a last minute thing and you call me on my cell or something and I can,
Okay.
but but otherwise I'd be out of pocket, I believe. So if we get at least 3 others to commit, they can be online just to continue, that'd be great.
I will also be like totally MIA. So
Yes, you have warned me. I think Brian can make it.
I can be there. So.
Okay,
And I can be there too. This is tomorrow we're talking about,
just
right?
tomorrow. Yes.
Just
Yeah, I
for
should be
6 for, like as she said, a few minutes just to open and just to say we're motioning to continue to whatever date Valerie proposes tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay. Can you be there, Andy, for that?
I can be there. It's
So there's
just a
3.
little worried about being there right at 6 p.m., but
Okay, well, just keep in touch with Valerie so she has at least a time frame, and then we'll do the best we can. It wasn't preferable that we have to move these around this late time, but we appreciate everyone's flexibility. All right, so with that, we just need a motion to adjourn.
I will make a motion to adjourn.
second.
And those in favor, Brad Reed,
Yes.
Andy Kishitz,
yes.
Gerard Ahern,
Yes.
Elizabeth Hutchins,
Yes.
and Gabrielle Romano.
Yes.
Thank you.
8 o'clock, perfect. Nice. Well, thanks, folks.
Night.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Good night.
Thanks, Valerie.
Thank you, Gerard.
You work awful hard. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you too.
Bye.
Bye.